Well, it has been a long time, Mark, but Mark Dolfini is on the call with us, the landlord coach, and great to chat with you, catch up with you, and what just for people who haven't, I think you were on episode 82 or something, so it's been almost a year. It's been over a year.
Yeah.
What what you been up to?
Nothing, man. Just, sitting back, hiding in a cave, holding my breath like the rest of the world right now, learning to breathe through my ears.
Yeah, I know, right? It's been an interesting time, to say the least. So since we last talked, I know that you released and updated your book, and
Uh-huh.
it was called The Time Wealthy Investor, and now you have the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0.
Yes.
Um, let's start there, because I know that people probably are going to want to take a look at this book, because what I think was great that we talked about last time is that I think a lot of people struggle with the concept of, we get into this real estate investing for our to recapture some of that time, and in the process we lose track of that somehow, and now we're knee deep in projects and rehabs and everything. In fact, it almost seems like we've just kind of created ourselves yet another job. So
Right.
let's
Right.
start with your book. What's changed? I know there was a 1.0 and now there's a 2.0, so there's been some updates, so must have been some life experiences. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to talk about here today.
Well, the original, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And for those out there who have read the book, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. I've gotten some really good feedback. I mean, this book, I just let me tell you first what it's not. It's not a book on how to buy real estate. That is not what this is about. This is about, once you get the property, whatever acquisition strategy that you decide to use, whether you buy them wholesale, you buy them a tax sale, at, foreclosures, you buy them subject to, whatever. There's a whole host of ways to buy properties, right?
Mhm.
So the point is, when you get the property, then what? Because most of the time people say, yeah, I want to get into rentals, and they're so focused on the acquisition that they never think about the disposition. They never think about the backside of it. And that's where things generally tend to go sideways. So the original version, if you did not read it and you want to read the 2.0 version, you can skip the original version. This is just an upgraded, more in alignment with actually how I teach and how I coach. And that's using the VIP method, the Vision Infrastructure Process method. And we can go into that if you like,
Yeah,
and talk more about
that'd
that.
be awesome. You know, I, it just spurs the whole concept that we get caught in working in the business instead of on the business, and based on your acronym there, I'm guessing it kind of does that, refocuses people, and make sure that we have those type of processes in place.
Yeah, it's what really, to your point is we find ourselves getting into this horrible job that we created for ourselves when we create the very thing that we're trying to get away from, right? A
Hmm.
horrible boss. And you end up working for a much worse boss, and that boss is you, right?
Yeah.
Because you never allow yourself time off. You never allow yourself to not think about work and not do all the individual tasks. And I think that's a trap that I got into when I started at 0 units, and I built up this Frankenstein of 92 rental units through this hodgepodge of creative financing and wheeling and dealing. And I got 92 rental units, which is just about $6 million worth of real estate. And by all means, by all measures, from the outside, people were looking at me saying, man, this guy's crushing it. He's probably, back of the napkin, I was bringing in about $65,000 a month, but my life was the definition of awful. And
Hmm.
all I had done, just little by little, because I wasn't intentional about it. I wasn't intentional about setting up a business. What I had done was created all these little jobs for myself. And, whether it was bookkeeping or accounting or opening the mail, collections, doing the maintenance, answering the phone, all these little individual tasks that just added up over time. And, I ended up working 16, 18, sometimes 20 hours a day. And it was just absolutely unsustainable.
So where did you Was there a turning point in your life where you just like, man, I gotta change this? Like, it seems like we as people, right? We always react to pain instead of trying to run towards pleasure. I mean,
Right.
what I'm guessing that there was a pain point at one point where there was a turning point that caused you to revisit this.
Yeah, my life had a Jerry Maguire moment. Man, that's an old movie. I don't know if I can make that reference anymore.
Oh, I think
Um,
so. At least I'm
but
old enough to know what you're talking about.
right, yeah. But well, maybe if I say Hindenburg, my life had a like basically the Hindenburg was crashing into the Titanic. So I think maybe those are two relevant events in history that people would know. At
Mhm.
least one of those two. But so my Hindenburg moment was I had, again, I was running along. I had 92 rental units. I was working 16 hours a day, give or take. I mean, again, doing all this doing, I mean, just from nonsense stuff, from not just, I mean, important stuff like maintenance and doing showings. But I mean, my phone was relentless. It just rang. I mean, and really even that at that point in time, messaging wasn't that popular, but um, between emails and messenger pings and all this other stuff that was going on my phone, and then the housing crisis, which really I don't really consider it a housing crisis. It was really more of a labor market issue. The labor market fell apart in 2008, and my $65,000 a month went to $30,000 a month. And, I had leveraged all these things pretty fully. And my life went into a tailspin pretty quickly. Um, so just trying to keep the ship afloat, I started working more. Again, I was kind of stuck on stupid because I wasn't really thinking about, working smarter. I was just, hey, this task needs to be done. Let me go run and do that task.
Mhm.
So I just worked harder. I worked more, and I ended up working, 16, 18, 20 hours a day. Sometimes I would work 24, 30 hours at a stretch, grabbing naps in the Lowe's parking lot or, wherever I could. And it caught up with me, and it caught up with me in a really, really bad way. And I got a cold, of course, because that's what happens when your body gets run down. And
Mhm.
before I had even realized it, I actually had developed double pneumonia. And I got to the hospital, and I nearly died in the hospital. It was that was pretty much the bottom for me. When
Mhm.
I'm laying there, I'm mouthing for air on this gurney, and I'm thinking, man, I literally almost worked myself to death. And things had to change, and things got very real at that point. And
Right.
that was kind of the beginning of the that was the beginning of the beginning, I guess, for me, because wasn't long after that I lost about 2/3 of my rental portfolio that I had built up in the previous 10 years. So, I was able to turn a $6 million portfolio into about $1.5 million. I don't know that there's a course that anybody would actually buy for something like that, because became an expert at losing money. But I went through all that, and when I rebuilt, I was intentional about building a business that wasn't going to take me, where I had to work 20 hours a day,
Mhm.
but that removed me from all the individual line items and individual tasks that I had. So that's where I came up. I didn't call it that at first. It was just kind of, I looked at what I did after the fact, but that's really where I started the VIP method, which is vision, infrastructure, and process.
Sure. So, like, where did you start then? This is kind of. I think we're talking about this at the right time because I mean we're we're kind of in with the whole COVID-19 and everything going on right now. We're kind of in a weird economic situation. I think there's going to be some people who are finding themselves in a similar boat. Like if they're facing something like you just went through, where would you say that they should probably possibly start? Like what tactics or
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so that's a great question. And um, I I believe that the strength of what I teach and what I write about is because it's different. there's a lot of really good information out there about landlording tactics. I mean, and there's some really good stuff being taught out there. But here's the problem with tactics. I'll use a self-defense analogy for tactics, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a real big person. I'm 5'7", about $150, at best, right? So I'm not a real big guy.
Right.
So if I was going to defend myself, right, against a guy who's 6'7", I'm probably not going to try to do like a shoulder throw or like a hip throw or anything like that. Like it might be a great tactic, but it's not a great tactic for me, right? And it may only be in a very specific situation where that tactic would work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of my skill set and my tolerance for risk and my strength and, and even leverage and even in the situation, right? It's not going to work in every situation. So that's the problem with tactics is tactics. There's very few tactics where it's kind of one size fits all. And that's why I kind of flip that over and say, that's why the vision infrastructure process method is so important, because it really starts with, where are you trying to go?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Right. So the vision, the VIP method, starts with vision. Vision is really about, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What are you trying to get to? What are you trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
And, when I have that question and I ask that in the context of someone asking me about real estate, invariably, the answer will like, well, I want to be financially free, which means nothing. I want to be, I want to go do stuff, I want to go on vacation. Again, not real super specific.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're giving me these Miss America type answers, I
Right.
want peace on earth. I want no, or even worse, they'll say, well, I want 50 rental units. Okay. And the irony there is it always seems to be in increments of 25. Like, I don't know why that is, but it's like 50, 75, 100 rental units. Like, that's what they want. And you will usually come back with my universally snarky retort. 99 wouldn't get you where you want to go, and of course, well, yeah, 99 could probably work. Well, okay, 97 wouldn't, I mean, 97 is, I think it's a prime number. I mean, we could, right. So we'll go with that. And what they realize after a while, some usually, is that they're confusing the number of rental units with the life output that they think that will buy them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when they finally realize that it's not about the number of rental units, and it's really more about, I mean, realistically, what level of life output are you looking for? Now, I mean, really, what is it that you really want? I mean, what are you really willing to get up on a rainy Sunday at 3 a.m. for, because it's that important to you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and this isn't your why. This is your vision. This is something specifically. Like, our kids are our why. And like, you might get out of bed for your kids because it's your duty as a parent, right? But I'm not
Right.
talking about duty. I'm talking about what you really, 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 really want. Now, maybe you really, really want to be a parent, and that's something that's really, truly important to you. And you being an engaged parent is really part of your vision. Absolutely, that's part of my vision.
Mm-hmm.
As my bride and I are raising our two sons to be good men, right? That's part of
Right.
my vision. So what does that mean? I bought a property and I'm not a flip guy. I mean, I will flip properties here and there, but I wanted to buy this property, and it was from soup to nuts. This thing needed everything, but part of my vision is to raise two good men. Well, I also want them, like, one day my son, we were changing the battery out on the lawnmower, and I said, go bring me a pair of vice grips and an adjustable wrench. And he brings me like a screwdriver and a stapler. And I was like, oh God, I'm so failing you as a father right now. so, so I was like, okay. So I got this flip property, and we're down there, and we're sanding floors, and we're wiring boxes, and we're doing stuff that, I remember, and I'm saying, hand me the lineman pliers, and I get all sorts of the various assortment of pliers, right? I said, no, those are the lineman pliers. Like, that's the stuff I enjoy. I enjoy working with my hands. I enjoy doing that, but I enjoy it because it's not a job. I
Right.
enjoy it because it's part of my vision, for my sons and I. But once we flip this property, I'm probably not going to do another flip for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
If ever. Like, it's not part of my vision, but I do enjoy that with them, Okay. So it's that particular thing is not about making money. It's about, because it's part of my vision. Now we'll probably make a little bit, but I've
Mhm.
held this property for so long. It definitely was not ideal to flip the property as long as I've been holding it. But, it's just, especially with the COVID thing, I didn't want them out and that sort of thing. But,
Right.
um, so to answer the question is, when people are going through what they're going through right now, I really challenge them to implore about what it is they're trying to accomplish. If they're trying to leave their job, that's fine. But don't just make it a list of don'ts. Make it a list of what you do want, right?
Mhm.
Because I often say, well, having a list of things that you don't want is like going to a grocery store with a list of all the things that you don't want to buy,
Mhm.
right? And that's like, so you go to the store with a list of bread, milk, and eggs because that's what you don't want. And guess what you're going to see when you go to the grocery store? You're going to see bread, milk, and eggs everywhere, right?
Right.
So what I would say is focus specifically on your vision, about specifically what it is that you do want. Make it a specific revenue goal. $12,214 a month. Okay, that's great. That will get you to a preliminary vision of what it's going to take you to not work at a be employed at a job, and now you are self-sustaining in your real estate investments. Something along those lines. And then what is it that you do want to do with this free time? Not just, you need to be specific. Otherwise, you know, unaccounted for, unallotted free time, purposeless free time is not going to be, that's equally as bad, right?
Mhm.
Because then you're going to find maybe not so good things to fill in your time, right?
Right.
So that's why, it's really, really important to have a real clear vision of what is you're trying to accomplish, what your life output wants to look like before you ever get to that point.
Sure. So, that was, you just reminded me of an activity when I first started doing this whole real estate thing. I always found it strange, like you said, and maybe it's just the way I'm wired, that people would uh, pick it seemed like an arbitrary, just a random number of how many units that they need. What I did was I looked at my outgoing expenses, and then anytime I acquired a rental property, I would subtract that cash flow for that specific property from that tally, so I could see how I was possibly chipping away from my monthly obligations.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love that.
So it was just a way for me to, for me, that just made more sense, because some properties are a home run and they just simply cash flow better than others. So to
Right.
just have I need 50 units. I guess I never took that type of approach.
Yeah, and I think more to that point. I mean, you're spot on there. Um, I think that people often forget that when you're taking on an additional unit, or 5 or 10 or whatever you're buying, right? Not just how much additional cash flow are you making, but how much additional freedom are you getting?
Right.
Because what I've noticed, and I started teaching this because honestly, I realized that I had done it wrong for years, and I didn't realize that other people are still doing it wrong. Is that underwriting their properties?
Hmm.
And what I realized was, as I'm coaching people, I would say, well, who's doing the leasing or showing of the property? And like, oh, that's us. I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, that's not an activity you enjoy. Like, you have to spend your weekends doing it. Well, I don't know how to, we don't have enough money coming in to do that. Okay. So you didn't budget it on a line item when you bought that property. So, okay, well, who does the maintenance? Well, we do the maintenance. Who does the, collections? Well, we do it, right? We're doing the management. We're doing everything. So then I realized that for every line item that you don't budget for, that's a job that you create for yourself,
Hmm.
right? So if you don't budget for leasing expense, like lease up, right? Meaning, you get the property rented. Guess what? You created a job for yourself. Now,
Right.
what would that take to get someone else? So we'll talk. I'll give you a specific tactic, right? It doesn't necessarily one size fits all, but let's say that you budget for someone else to lease the property for you.
Hmm.
Some property managers will do just lease up, right? Where it may cost anywhere from 50% to a full month's rent, right? So
Hmm.
if you budget for that and you buy the property right, it could work, right? And that's not
Right.
a problem. Um, or let's say for argument's sake that you have a new realtor who's trained in fair housing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone who knows fair housing laws. Would it make sense for them to spend a day showing the property where they might make $500? Yeah. I mean, I think for many realtors who are on commission, and right now just getting listings is really tough because there's such a low inventory on the market right now. It's just tricky. So for someone who's trying to pay their bills, right, an extra $500 would make a big difference, right? So there's obviously things like that you can put in place to have someone else do the lease up. But if you don't budget for that as a line item, you created that job for yourself, right? Now, you might say, well, $500, man, that's a lot of money. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing that. I'd do that job for $500. Okay, that's fine. Amortize how much time that is taking for you to make that $500. And when you do, and you realize that you're taking, an entire weekend to do it, 500 times 50 hours or however long you're spending, if it's taking you a full week of actual activity related to that lease up, now you're making $10 an hour. Mm-hmm. I hope to God that you didn't get into real estate to just make a job that pays you only $10 an hour. Right. So that's why I say, learn to value your free time, because if you don't place a value on your free time, someone else will.
Right. So, that just leads me to, we could just continue down these rabbit holes. Like, I think a lot of people have a hard time with the concept of, well, frankly, property managers typically aren't going to care as much as you.
Right.
And so now you're kind of relinquishing some of that responsibility and some of those tasks to somebody that has to be a team member. Do you have any tips and tricks as to how to select these type of people? I mean, there's, frankly, that's just the situation. They just don't have the skin in the game like you do.
Yeah, and I am a property manager, so I will tell you you're absolutely right. And I coach property managers as well. And I will tell you that fundamentally, so let me go back to the VIP method for just a second. Okay. So let me explain that. Then I'm going to answer the reason why property managers are terrible at this. Okay. And you'll understand it in the context. So vision is really about what you're trying to accomplish, right? So once you get a really clear vision of your future, right? Let's say that and I use this analogy all the time, but let's say that part of your vision is to lay on the beach for 2 months out of the year, rubbing cocoa butter on your belly, right? Mm-hmm. The next piece is infrastructure.
Do you speak with experience on that? That seems a little close to home there.
Yeah. As my white belly, showing to the sky. That's just awful, an awful visualization. Yeah, but say, let's say for argument's sake, you want to lay for 2 months let's face it, me sitting still for 2 months would be bad for the world. So no, I don't do that, but, but no, I do enjoy my time off. Mm-hmm. But the point is, if you have a real clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish, the next piece of the VIP method is infrastructure. Now, infrastructure involves the bones of the business, right? The desks, the chairs, the software, the computer systems, but it also involves the asset class, right? Now, in the beginning, I was buying everything that was for sale. So, basically, if it had a price tag on it, as long as the numbers reasonably worked, and again, I did that wrong too, but if the numbers reasonably worked, then I would buy it. Now, a lot of the stuff I was buying was just C and D and F type properties. I mean, these were awful, right?
Right.
Well, the problem was I was buying up properties that required such a high degree of maintenance that it was attracting clientele that needed a very high degree of management.
Right.
Right. Just wearing me out. And again, it was just bad. It was just a bad fit for me in terms of, having any sort of time off. So that's the infrastructure piece. Now, the final piece is process. Process is how you do stuff. That's the tactics that we talked about earlier, right? So now, so you've got these processes that run on the infrastructure that you built that all stays in alignment with your vision for the future, okay? Now, if you don't have enough infrastructure or process, if your infrastructure is weak, okay, let's say that you don't have a property management system, like a property management software system, right? Or your processes are not good, okay, meaning like rents don't come in a consistent manner. You don't have a real consistent way of doing collections because there's no process for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that has to get beefed up with people,
Right.
right? So if the infrastructure or process is weak, it always shows up in one place, always. And that's poor communication. It's always related to bad communication. And I'll give you an example that's outside of real estate. Let's say we've all had bad service at a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's happened, right? Well, what's the real problem? The problem is we can't communicate our order to the kitchen, right?
Right.
Or the kitchen never got the order, right? That's a communication issue. That's either an infrastructure problem, meaning that there was no systematic way to make sure that the order got delivered to the kitchen. There was no negative feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
A negative feedback loop means that if something doesn't happen, how do you know, right?
Right.
So that's why a lot of times you'll see the negative feedback loop in a lot of well-run restaurants is when you get the manager that comes around to the tables and say, how is everything tonight? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now they'll do it generally roughly about halfway into your visit, but at least it's some sort of negative feedback loop. If there's no negative feedback loop, it's left up to the customer to say, hey, where's my food? Hey, can she take our order? Or the process is bad because that waiter's got 7 tables and this waiter over here only has 2,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've all seen that. That's bad infrastructure, bad process. It means that they're either not scheduling them right, they're not parceling the work out right, or something, but it's something related to infrastructure or process. Okay. So bring that into the realm of property management companies. Most times what I see is it's generally, now you have to be in most states, and I'm pretty sure it's in all states, that you're required to have a real estate broker's license to do property management. Nearly always, this is a realtor also doing property management on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or even if it's a business, they're also doing, they're selling real estate. They're doing, they're doing property management. They'll sell essential oils. I mean, they'll do anything for money, right? They'll do
Yeah,
whatever
well,
they need.
a great example is we're seeing somebody right now who they have a cleaning service, they have a
Yep.
handyman service. So there's a lot of other companies spinning, it's all related, but it's spinning off from that core property
Yeah.
management business.
Yeah. And they're trying to be a one-stop shop,
Mm-hmm.
which, again, they're serving too many masters. They're chasing too many rabbits and they end up catching none. So the problem is they don't have a real intentional infrastructure built around infrastructure or around process. So what ends up happening in a property management system, property management company, is that you get 1 or 2 people that are worked to death, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have, you have things that fall through the cracks,
Right.
and the infrastructure and processes. What ends up happening is, you get bad communication, you get maintenance that gets done that you didn't even know about. Again, what's the negative feedback loop? If the resident doesn't pay rent, how do you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's like, well, you never think to tell the owner that the resident didn't pay rent. Well, is that relevant for the owner to know? Absolutely, it's relevant. What's the negative feedback loop? So all these things that happen, and it's just not communicated because of bad infrastructure or bad process. And most property management companies, especially the few, there's a few that I've worked with that were good and just want to be better. But there was a
Sure.
couple that I've worked with that were just an absolute barn fire mess, and they didn't recognize that they really needed to be intentional about building up and developing their infrastructure and processes. Now, if you are taking that in-house and you're the one that's going to do that, yes, you're going to manage it a lot closer to the best than a property management company would. That's why I wrote the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, because you can do this and not have to be operationally involved in all the intricate details of that. In fact, I would tell you that's probably not what your skill set is. If your skill set's doing the deals and you want to grow and you enjoy doing that part of it, but you don't enjoy the landlord trap of the operational stuff,
Mm-hmm.
then that's what this teaches you. It teaches you the vision, the infrastructure, and the process method. So you're not constrained operationally.
Sure. So let's backtrack there then. Let's say a lot of people, at least when they start out, they end up self-managing these. Like um, would you recommend getting a property manager if you just have one unit, or would you like what systems in place do you think are needed so that it's a successful self-management, and
Right.
how do you maintain the communication you need with the residents, but not
Right.
feeling like you have to say that? Sometimes I think that there's some level of empowerment that we could possibly give some of the residents where they could feel comfortable replacing their own light bulb, for example. You don't have to
Right.
respond to every single thing, but um, again, it probably relies on that level of communication or something to the resident.
Yeah, I mean, and I know um, um, some tacticians, right? Some gurus teach that the resident should be responsible for the first 50 or $100 worth of maintenance or whatever it is.
Right.
In my experience, that only works with certain asset classes.
Sure.
Because if I've got a B or A type property, generally that could work. It's also been my experience that if you're not having recent or frequent inspections on the property, people don't respect what you don't inspect. So if you're not checking the property once in a while and you go there and, let's just face it, as homeowners,
Hmm.
you and I, we kind of go to the garage, we flip on the light and you're like, what's wrong with the bulb? And then you wiggle the switch and it comes on. You're okay with leaving the switch kind of, well, you have to wiggle it, whatever. It's not perfect, but you know how it works.
Right.
In that situation, if I know that I'm gonna have to pay $50 or up to $50 to repair little nuance items like that for a property that I don't own, am I really likely to do the maintenance? Probably not.
Hmm.
So if you want a well-maintained home, you have to be intentional about it. But again, if you budget for it, it shouldn't be a burden.
Hmm.
But that's why when people like, if you're buying properties through the MLS, you're buying retail. It's like going to a Target, right? Or a
Hmm.
Walmart or whatever, buying a jacket,
Right.
walking to the parking lot of that same store and trying to sell that jacket for a profit,
Hmm.
right? Now, could you? Yeah, I suppose, but man, that's a really hard way to make a living,
Hmm.
right? You're paying retail, you're paying too much, you're paying, you're basically putting it out to the world, and you're paying you're paying retail commissions to a real estate agent, and then if you're getting a mortgage from a bank, now you're paying retail for the money that you're
Hmm.
borrowing, right? It's just really really expensive. And then if it's a any sort of renovation that has to happen, now you're paying retail to a general contractor, right? Like you're just doing you're checking all those wrong boxes. I mean, it's basically you're on the wrong side of retail,
Right.
right? So you have to make sure that you're buying properties and budgeting those individual line items. I can tell you if you're buying properties that way, I'm not saying that you can't ever get there, but man, it's just gonna be a while before you build up enough equity in the property where the cash flow starts overtaking the the other expenses that you have.
Right.
So
So.
so to answer the question, I think that realistically, do people should they turn it over to a property manager? Um, what's your vision? What is your vision? What are you trying to accomplish? If you can't stomach the thought of ever having to talk to a human being that's going to occupy a property, and you really don't want to manage anybody, I mean, you really want to turn it over to a property manager and kind of set it and forget it. I will tell you, as a property manager, the people that I really don't like managing for are the people that are not engaged, or the people that come in once every 6 months, question every charge from the last 6 months, and like, dude, I've sent you statements every single month, and now you're questioning stuff,
Hmm.
like, so that's I will caution you that in my experience, and again, this is just my truth, and people are happy to disagree with me and show me proof otherwise, but it's rare that I find, I haven't come across anybody that has a true set and forget sort of real estate asset that generates returns without ever having to touch it, without ever having to be engaged, without ever having to make a decision.
Right.
And I know people love the idea of mailbox money, and as they're counting their money from their yacht, and the Caymans. I'm just telling you that, and in my opinion, you have to be willing to manage the managers, or you have to be willing to manage the business.
Right.
Now, what does that mean? Sometimes you are going to have to call, and I would schedule, depending on your level of what it is you're trying to accomplish. Maybe it means a weekly call with your property manager. In my case, I honestly think that many people can manage it by themselves, because now they become business owners,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're managing their assistant. Now they're managing their CPA or their attorney. Now they're managing other people that helps them make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And some people just don't have the skill set or the risk tolerance for that. I get that. And that's not wrong. I'm just saying, I get that. It's a good self-awareness measure to have. But I think a lot of people can manage it, especially people who are self-managing now. They can just make it better
Mm-hmm.
and have someone else do the stuff that they just intrinsically just aren't good at.
Sure. Well, what are your thoughts on resident managers? Having somebody on site that you might be giving them a little rent break or something to help with some boots on the ground kind of a thing.
Yeah. So if you've got a multifamily and you want to have somebody that's there on site, I would keep the transaction at arm's length. I don't think that's a bad idea. But you have to make sure that they're paying the full rent like everybody else, and you compensate them separately like everybody else. Now, with somebody that's living on site, then you may be getting into some, are they employees? Are they not employees? That's something for you to decide with your attorney or your CPA. But I like the idea, just because, heck, if they're willing to take that on, then
Mm-hmm.
they've got an actual person on site that can manage that sort of stuff. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I would have the expectations very clearly drawn, and I would also have the compensation very clearly drawn. But I would separate the fact that they're a resident from the fact that they're basically working for you. I would separate those two roles completely, because that water can get muddied very, very quickly.
Okay. No, that's a good point. So, gee, we're kind of we went almost double the time that I told you it was probably going to, and I had a feeling that was going to be the case. But you got to admit, I warned you.
Yeah, that's fine. I just hope that people that are watching this aren't bored to tears.
No, I'm sure not. So we could just keep going here, but right now, is there any questions that you think we probably should have asked here today that?
No, I think, I know sometimes my questions or my answers to your questions seem a little vague, because, again, I always ask the people, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What are some things that people can do? And I'm not trying to be self-serving. I promise you, if you buy my book through Amazon, I'm not making a ton of money. And just basically, it's really more about, like, most of the money goes to Amazon, unfortunately. But if you buy the book, The Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, this is what it looks like. So if you buy that book, there's a lot in there. And if you're not a reader, it is available on Audible as well. But if you buy the book, I think it's a really good way for you to get started, even if you have no intention of managing the property yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to make you an expert in the VIP method. And then when you start to see other businesses that don't run well, you're going to recognize why. And here's the problem with infrastructure and process, that when a system is running well, it's very hard to notice, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
until something's either non-existent or broken that you even notice, right? Like, think of a toll gate, right?
Mm-hmm.
You drive up to the toll, you throw your quarter in, and the gate doesn't go up,
Right.
right? That's obviously an infrastructure problem. Something's broken with the infrastructure. So now the cars are all backed up behind you. Everybody's honking. No one can get over. It's a mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not until it's broken or non-existent, like, basically, let's say, there's some issue that's going on, and there's no mechanism to fix the problem, right?
Right.
Let's say for argument's sake that there's no one there tending to the toll gate that can come over and hit a button and make the arm go up, right? Let's say no one is there to fix that because they relied on it being automated.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a problem, right? Now it's non-existent. So now you've either got a broken infrastructure or you've got a non-existent infrastructure, but or a non-existent process, right? Or a broken process. So that's why I say, like, it's really hard for me to answer these questions real specifically, because not everybody's going to have the same skill set, risk tolerance, stuff like that. But I think if you did read the book or listen to the Audible, it's going to make you start to think in a new way. It's going to start to make you think specifically, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What is your vision? What's this all for? And when you can start getting really clear on what it is you're actually doing this all for, all of a sudden that becomes your true north to make all decisions by.
Mm-hmm.
And you can then look through that lens anytime an opportunity comes up and says, hey, is this opportunity going to bring me closer to my vision, or is it going to bring me further away? If we're going on a road trip from Detroit to Key West, because our vision is to sit on a beach chair drinking cold drinks, watching the sun go down, and a good goal along the way from Detroit to Key West is Indianapolis, Chattanooga, Atlanta, right? We've got goals along the way. But let's say we're halfway between Indianapolis and Chattanooga, and you say, hey, you know what? I got this buddy who lives in St. Louis. We should totally go hang out with him. I haven't seen him since the third grade. He'd be a blast.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to say, Jack, dude, that's literally completely in the opposite direction. It's going to take us completely away from our vision. Like, no, like, let's stay focused on our vision. Let's get to our vision. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sort of thing that when you get really hyper focused, it gives you that ferocity of purpose that nothing else in the world matters except getting to that vision. So that's why I would say, get really clear on your vision. And if you're having struggles, I'm happy to have a conversation with people, because this is something I'm really passionate about. And I really believe that the real estate space is really missing this piece because we're all so tactically driven.
Right. No, I can't thank you enough, Mark. This was a great conversation. In fact, it kind of changed some perspective or refocused a few things for me. I really appreciate that. If people did want to reach out to you, where would they find you?
Generally, I'm on Facebook. You can find me at My Landlord Coach. My logo looks like this, so I'm pretty easy to find. I've got a YouTube channel, but if you want to just drop me an email and you'd like to have a discovery session and just kind of a strategy session, my email is mark@landlordcoach.com. It's pretty simple, mark@landlordcoach.com. And you can reach out to me then. I'm happy to have a conversation really with anybody. I'm not a strong sales kind of guy, and I recognize I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But I am passionate about making sure that people are heading in the right direction. It's rare that I talk to somebody that doesn't want to make their world better, and they want to do that by having some time freedom and by having a little bit extra money. It's rare that I don't talk to someone that wants to give more back to their community, or spend more time at their church, getting a closer relationship with God. Like, how could I not get wrapped up in that? How could I not want to be passionate about that? So
Right.
if you'd like to have a conversation, I'd be happy to have that with anybody.
And I would highly encourage people to do so. So thank you again. It was great chatting with you. I'll make sure to include those links in the show notes. But really appreciate your time, and I hope we can do it this time, not wait a year and have you chat again sometime.
Very good. Well, thanks, Jack. It was a pleasure.